Hi, my name's Jeff Rhodes, and this is another video on the Power Platform inside Microsoft 365. So I love it when subscribers to my channel ask for things they'd like to see. So that's what we're going to do today. So a couple months ago, I did a second go round as far as open calendar slots and connecting to Outlook. And I had a comment recently, Mackenzie Potter, saying, hey, could you make a tutorial on sending a summary of the week's meeting in your Outlook calendar? So looking for 9 a.m. And it's a little bit different because the other examples that I gave, we went through every half hour and tried to find open slots. So this is kind of the reverse. So it's actually a little bit simpler. So let's get started. So first thing is, this is my Microsoft 365 calendar, so I don't have a whole lot on here normally. So I added some things in there. So I wanted to show an out of office, say a staff member out of office, and then I put a daily stand up every day at 9 o'clock, and then some optional meetings and lunch and a few planning times and things like that, just so we could compare, because the hardest thing about these calendars is the time zone and stuff. So we want to kind of deal with that. So let's get started. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create, and this is a perfect example of a scheduled flow. So I'm going to call it video weekly calendar email. And I'm going to start it, really doesn't matter because we're just going to do it in testing, but I'm going to say 9 a.m. And we're going to repeat every week. And we're only going to do it on Mondays. But one of the things I'll do is, since I'm testing it and it's actually a Saturday today, I went ahead and put some logic in so that if it's not a Monday when it kicks off, then it will go to the next Monday. So otherwise it was kind of hard to test it. Right, so we're going to come in here. And like most of my videos, we have to first get started in a bunch of variables. So we'll just get into that. But I played around a number of times with the best way to do time zones. And I found this online with daylight savings time and so forth, how to sort that out. So it's a little bit simpler and keep us from having to hard code it for a particular time zone. So let's start with that. So we got a few variables related to time zone. So I'm going to initialize, and the first one I'm going to call is var UTC now. And you'll see in my other videos, I like to just document as we go along. So literally, what I'm going to do with this one is do the function UTC now, like that. Can add a new one. And what I'm going to call this one is I'm in mountain time, but it doesn't actually have to be, because this could just say var time now, but I just call it mountain time now. Oh, actually, I guess it does in a sense, because I do need to have what time zone I'm in. So it will be mountain time now. But what's good is that we don't have to specify whether it's daylight savings or not, because we found a way to figure that out. So this one has it's convert from UTC. And so we take that variable that we just created and we say, okay, what is that variable in mountain? And it's a little bit confusing because it says mountain standard time, but it really just means mountain time, because this will work whether it's on daylight savings time or not. And then the key is now we can do a third variable. And we're going to call this UTC offset. And this is, you saw this in my last video too. It's a little bit, I think it's a weakness, but I have to make this string first because otherwise I won't be able to get to any of my variables. So we're going to change it to an integer in a minute because that's what we actually want. And so what we have to do is we'll just build it from the beginning. It's a little bit complicated expression. I found this in a Stack Overflow article. But we want to do date difference and notice that it returns difference between two as a time span. So that's the key because it's got a colon in it. So we're going to mess with that in a minute. But so what we want to do is the difference between UTC, which a UTC, if you're not familiar with it, that's universal time, and it's basically like Greenwich Mean Time, except it doesn't do daylight savings time. So we put the UTC now in, and then we use our var mountain time. So again, that's a time span. So it'll be like -7:00. So we have to split, and then we'll split on a colon like that. And then that gives us an array, and so we need the first part of the array, so that'll actually be, so that'll be first, which notice it's a collection, we take the first object. And then that'll be a number, but we need to convert that to an integer. So we'll see if I got all the parentheses right. And again, I wouldn't be able to reach those things if I said integer here. So I'm going to save right now. And then after it saves, now I can go and change this to an integer. So kind of a hassle, but that'll trip you up a little bit. But the good news is now I could figure out if I'm daylight savings time or not, because it has to do whether it's 7 or 6 or -7 or -6. But in this case, since our calendar is going to be in UTC, it should work even if I'm daylight savings time or not, because we don't want our things to be an hour off once we get back on daylight savings time, or if I'm in a state like Arizona where they don't have daylight savings time, I don't really have to mess with that. As long as I put the time zone that I'm in, where I said mountain time, I could have said Arizona standard time or whatever. So all right, we got a few more variables that we need to do. So I'll just be typing this over and over. Initialize data variables. Kind of wish it remembered the ones that we were doing this. I don't have to keep going over and over. But this one I'm going to call it var start date. What I'm going to first do is just put it to that var mountain time. This is a bit I mentioned where I want to actually check to make sure that's a Monday, because otherwise things get messed up a little bit. So I'm going to create another variable. And going to call it var start date offset. And this is because what I really wanted to do is loop through and keep adding a day to start date until I got to a Monday, but I got an error saying that I couldn't reference it inside of a loop. So I put this number instead to get that. So you'll see it's a little bit of a workaround. So I'm going to initial it. Whoops, and I didn't put the name of that in there. So var start date offset, and I'm initializing that to 0. So if this does kick off as scheduled on a Monday, we won't change anything. But now what I'm going to do is do a do loop. I'm just going to say do until start date is Monday, like that. And so what I can do is, there's a function in here called day of week, like that. And so what I want to do, since I'm going to change that offset during the loop, I want to go ahead and use add days. So I'm going to add days and use the start date, and I'm going to add the start date offset like that. So if that so we keep doing until that's equal to 1, because the day of week, Monday, unless you give another parameter or whatever, the first day of the week is Monday. But if I'm doing this on Saturday, you'll see I'll have to loop through a little bit. So now I come back here, and so if it's not a Monday, then I need to increment. So I can increment start day offset by 1. All right. And then I need to reset our start date based on that offset. So the easiest way, if it's already a Monday, then we can just add 0 to it and it'll still be the same. So we'll just either way, so we don't have to check if it's not equal to 0. We'll just say set variable, and we'll say add days. Oh, and this one doesn't like the start date, being inside the expression. So we'll go back to the mountain time. Remember, that's what we set it to anyway. So we'll add the offset like that. And this will be var start date. So we'll get to the good part pretty soon, but can't do any of this till we have our variables. And then we're going to need to know the end date when we get there. So again, be a string. And for that, we're going to need to add days. Oops, got to put our expression in first. And be our start date. It ends up being 4 because you have from Monday to Tuesday as 1, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. First I put 5 in there. It went all the way to Saturday, so that's where that goes. Getting over a cold here. So now we're going to get ready to do a big HTML table. And if you've watched my other videos, you'll see I do this a lot. Kind of a good way to kind of organize information. So I'm going to call this var weekly schedule. And it's a string. And I'm going to do some styles here. So I'm just going to copy in the first part, and then I'll put in the rest. So, okay, so I'm putting in a style tags, and you can go to the W3 schools or whatever. You'll see I've got a border, and I'm doing a collapse on there so I don't get double lines. And then I'm putting the table, the TR is the row, TH is the header. I'm going to have 4 columns here, so I want to go ahead and put in, right across the top from the start date to the end date. So let me go ahead and put that part because that's a little more interesting. We use this a ton, format date time. And I'm going to do start date. But I don't want any of the times in there. So I'm just going to put the capital D, and it just puts the date part in there, but with the day of the week and stuff, which is kind of nice. So I'll just say 2, and I can do the same thing again. And I'll grab the end date. I gotta say, oh, there it is. Notice these are single quotes. All right, and then I'm gonna grab the whole rest of this. So I'm going to close the heading, close the row, and then I'm going to put a whole nother line in there with the subject, the start time, the end time, and the status. And then I've ended the row. So now I'm ready to loop through and put a new row in every time that I've got a date. Or got, a new date, and we'll see where we put that in. Now this is where initially I ran into some problems with getting the calendar ones right and getting the dates correct. So I end up having to put a couple variables in there as well. So let's go ahead and put those in, and I'll explain what they're doing. So this one I'm going to call var calendar start date time. We'll copy that. And it's a string. And what I'm basically doing is the same thing I just put in there. I'm trying to get rid of the time part of this because I want it to start from like 12 a.m. basically to 11 p.m. on the end part of the date. So I need to pull, since I'm grabbing the current date and time when this is running, I want to get rid of that, in essence, is what's going on. And if I try to do this directly in the Outlook one, it gets confused. So if I put it in a variable, it seems to work better. So we do format date and time. Again, we'll grab the start date, and we'll do that D part that gets rid of the time. And then I'm going to do basically the same thing for the end date. But I want it to go to the end of the day. So let's go there and do variables. I'm just going to copy that in there and change this to end date. There we go. String. And what I'm basically going to do here is I'll start with that same format date time. Oh, I put the A. There we go. I'll put the end date and the D again. But that will basically give me 12 a.m. And I need that whole day to have it in there. So I'm going to add hours. And just add, I could add 24, but I decided to add 23. So I'll put us to 11 p.m. on that date. So if you have some stuff that's going right around midnight, you might need to play with that a little bit. And then one more variable, so we're almost done, is I need a way when I'm looping to tell that I'm on a new date. So I'm going to create one more variable, call it loop date. And it's a string. And I'm just going to set that to be this calendar start date for now because it's the exact same formula. All right, so we can get to the good part now. Let's go ahead and try to read all our events. So now we'll go to Outlook. All right, so we'll go to Outlook and we want to get calendar view of events. And we want to select the calendar. And you might remember in the other videos, if you've got access to somebody else's calendar, then you can pick them from the list. Like if you're trying to manage your boss's calendar or something. I'm just doing my own. And these are where I'm going to use those variables. So I'm going to use the calendar start end time and the calendar end date time. And then the other thing I noticed is this didn't come through with done in order. And so I can come into the query, and it's really confusing because you'd expect this to say start like that, but it doesn't. You have to say start / date time and then ascending for ASC. Somebody found that. I found it in an article, but certainly not obvious. So put in the comments if you have a good reference for where that came from. But that should give us the stuff in order. And then what we want to do is go ahead and we want to apply to each, and we'll just say loop through events. And what I want to do is grab the calendar items like that. And then what I want to do is I want to check if a new day. There we go. So the way I do that is I basically just need to check the start date of the event, since I've put them in order, and then compare that to that loop day that I set up. Because what I want to do when I get to Tuesday, I want a new row that says just as Tuesday's events and then Wednesday, so they're not all lumped together and stuff. So we'll use that same format date time. But notice here, instead of using one of our variables, I'm going to go to the start time of the event because I'm looping through the event. So I just say D again, which is just the date part. And if that's not equal to my var loop date, then what I want to do is add a row. So I want to come in here, go to variables again, and we're going to increment or append a string variable. So the one we want is that weekly schedule. There we go. And what I want to do is put a new row in there. So I'm going to grab the first part. It's very similar to what we put before, so I don't have to retype. So that's going to span the whole column. And then I'm going to go ahead and basically use the same function that I used in the check. So I'm going to say format date and time, start, use that same D, and then I'll close the header, close the row, like that. And then what I need to do so that it loops, I need to make sure I set that variable. So that will mess you up because it'll never change. So I need to set the var loop date. And we'll use that same expression, format date and time, start. So when I get to Tuesday, then the rest of the Tuesday events, we won't write it in there till we get to Wednesday. Then I'll set it to Wednesday and so forth. There we go. And then make sure outside this, so it's easy if I kind of collapse that, come in here. Either way, I want to write each event. So I'm going to come in here and again go append the string variable. So I'll just say append var weekly schedule, and they have to have different names. So I'll say 2 and I don't want to put the variables in from my other one because I might mess it up. So I'm going to say, if you might remember, I want to get the subject. And then I want to close the column, start the new column. And I'm going to use that same expression, format, date, time, start. Oh, and actually, let's see. Yeah, I don't want to use because I actually want the time here. So I put the G, which gives us a full date with the time as well. So I'll actually copy that because I'm going to need it for in a minute. So I'll just close this, close the column, start a new column. Paste that back in, except this won't be the start. It'll be the end. That. And let me just copy that again. And I've got one more. I want to put the status so you can see if it's tentative or busy, free, that kind of thing. So I'll come in here and we got to say see more here, and we can say show as. There we go. Status show during the event. And then we'll close this. And we want to close the row. All right. And then outside, so notice what this is going to get me, the whole set of events for the entire week, Monday through Friday. And I just need to close off our variable. So I'll say variable again. Append to string variable. So I'll say append to var weekly schedule 3. And we just close off the table. It's got to have good HTML or things won't work right. All right. And as you know from other videos, we could send a Teams chat very easily as well, but the person asked for this to go via email, so both those are about the same amount of work. So we'll send an email. We'll say maybe send schedule email. I'm just going to send it to myself. And you can do some nice things here. So I'll say weekly schedule. Oh, and actually I forgot all our time zone stuff. So I got to actually go fix that in a second here. But let's finish this and I'll go back. Yeah, it was one of the big things. I didn't use my time zone offset yet. So I'm going to come in here and I have to format our date as well. So I'm going to say format date time from the start date. Let's see in the start, there we go, from start date. That. And date. And then we come in and put that HTML table in. Like that. All right, so we have the thing, but we got to go back. I need to go back to this line over here. I kind of went right by the dates. So I got ahead of myself. So I just did the format that, but the important thing to note is that this comes out as that UTC time. So if I just say this, it's going to be way off. It's actually going to be 7 hours off. is what we need to do. So we got to fix this here. So we'll leave the G in there, but we need to change the date so that it matches up. And that's how we did that time zone offset in the first place. So we need to add hours. And it's important to note that this is, since the way I did it, I've got a -7. So I don't have to multiply by -1 like I did in one of my other videos, because that I was saying 7-hour offset, and it's actually -7. So this one, it takes care of that on its own. So I just say add hours, and then I use that variable, which is that UTC offset, like that. And I need one more parentheses. Let's see if that's right. There we go. And I got to do the same on the end date. So again, I'll say add hours. And again, if we don't do this, all the dates and times will all be wrong. The dates will be right, but the times will be wrong. So I want to say that's var UTC offset, like that. Oops, I think I didn't put my second parenthesis in there. There we go. All right, let's try it now. So let's save it. Kind of dicey. I should have been saving the whole time, so we kind of hope I didn't make mistakes here. So far, so good. So we'll test it manually and run the flow. Let's see what it looks like. I'll have to open my Outlook. I hadn't actually opened that, so I'll open that on the other side. Yeah, it just popped up, but let's go look at it for a second first. So if we come through here, notice that it did go twice through, because that makes sense, because I'm a Saturday, so I had to go to Sunday and to Monday. And if we look at the var start date, there we go. So the value is January 6th, which is in fact a Monday. And then if I look at the calendar of events, it's saying there's 22 events. So that's good. And if I flip through these, I'll be able to kind of see that it's, switched out. I'm kind of zoomed in on it right now. But anyway, it went through, send a schedule email. So let me bring that up and we can check it and see if it looks right. All right, so there it is. So it's going from Monday to Friday. And I noticed this when I was testing. The only ones that are actually off are the all-day events, because that really should be 12 a.m. to 12 a.m. But these other ones are exactly right. So let's see if I can switch back to the calendar. So this daily stand-up should be every day at 9 a.m. I should have an optional meeting from 11 to 12:30, lunch from 12 to 12:30. Wednesday, I should have a monthly review from like 10 to 2. So let's go back and see. So got daily stand-up at 9, optional meeting 11 to 12:30. I didn't mention, but I got planning time every day 4 to 4:30. I put in there this staff check-in meeting. Let's go see that. Did I have a 2 p.m.? Yeah, so 2 to 2:30 check-in. And then this is where we put the extra row in at the beginning of each day. So that worked out pretty well and got all the way through lunch. So actually I have something not quite right here, because notice I should have had a planning time after lunch. So let's go look at Friday. So something got a little messed up. Yeah, so it looks like I missed this planning time. So even though we've been in this video for a little bit, let's see if I got kind of zoomed in, so I'm going to come back as well. So let's see if we can figure out what happened on that time. So let's go look at the end date. So the end date was 2025 the 10th, and then it's like 3 p.m. and so forth. So maybe we didn't adjust it, but this VAR calendar end date, yeah, so it is the 10th, and it is 2300, which is 11 p.m. So that kind of got messed up a little bit. I mean, I was right. Sorry, it should have been okay. Let's make sure we got the, so end date was the 10th. It's showing 2300 on that. So not entirely sure why. Let's go to the end of the loop here and see what the last event is. See if maybe something didn't get done here. Let's see. Yeah, so the last one was 12 p.m. lunch that it showed. So we're a little bit off somehow. Maybe the 7 hours. Yeah, let's try to see if we can run that again. Let's make that 24 hours. So we'll come here. Which is effectively like adding a day, but that's okay. Let's say 24. Let's just see if that picks up the other one. Didn't notice that when I was testing this, but those time zones are kind of a bear for stuff at the end of the day, so that's probably what's going on. So the first thing we'll look at inside there is if it went to 23 events. Oh, it did. See how it went to 23 events. Let's see if that was enough. So what I could have done is like added 23 plus the time zone offset or whatever. But here, let me bring over, that's the new video. Yeah, and sure enough, it picked up this 4 o'clock one. So a little debugging on top of that as well. So, all right, well, I will sign off here. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to talking to you guys next time.